presentations are coming out of. So we've got an exciting evening planned for you, I think. Hopefully. I'm excited. Hopefully the rest of you are excited. We'll have, first of all, presentations from David Lane, the Federal Reserve, and then we'll have Yelena Takhtamanova, again presenting on the economic outlook from the Fed. We're very excited and very happy to have them. Then we'll have a break, which is, I'm sure, something we're all very excited about. There will be snacks provided. Sandwiches, I think. Sandwiches? Sandwiches. And after the break, we'll have a presentation of a project that we've had students working on all semester. They've been working very hard, I can attest to, where we will be essentially simulating a meeting of the Federal Open Market Committee, which is the monetary policy decision-making body at the Federal Reserve. So we'll have several student presentations. We'll then have a proposal from the chairman of the FOMC to make any changes to the policy statement and press release, and we'll have a vote. After the student presentations, we'll have a question and answer session with our representatives from the Fed, and then we'll have, I suppose, the rest of our evenings. So, I'm looking forward to it. We've been putting a lot of work into this. We're very, very happy to have our representatives, and if there's no further issues of concern, I didn't prepare a long speech or anything particularly impressive. So, what's that? Oh, okay. Well, excellent. I'm setting exactly the right mood. I'm going to turn things over to David Lane. Thank you for coming.
Hi, my name is David Lang. I will be your intro to the FOMC speaker, but first a little about myself. I've been a research analyst at the Fed for a little over 3 years in both the Economic Outreach and Economic Research Department. In fact, I started 2 weeks before the financial crisis started, just before AIG and Lehman Brothers went under. I swear that's completely correlation, no causation there whatsoever. So, let's get to it. Today we're going to talk a little bit about what the Federal Reserve is, what they do, and as many of you, I'm sure, are aware, one of their most important functions is conducting monetary policy. We're going to talk about the goals of monetary policy, the tools the Federal Reserve uses to implement said policy, and we'll talk about the FOMC, the body which presides over the monetary policy decisions. Our mission is to promote the safety, soundness, and stability of our financial system, and we'll talk about how we do that in a little bit more detail later on. With regards to monetary policy, our goal is to promote maximum sustainable output and stable prices. This is unique amongst most central banks, in that most central banks typically only have one target. They typically target a monetary aggregate or an inflation rate, whereas the Federal Reserve is explicitly concerned about both inflation and unemployment. And in addition to monetary policy, the Fed does a lot that I'm sure many of us are not aware of. I didn't know all these things until I started working there. Beyond conducting monetary policy, we go and conduct and examine banks for safety and soundness. We provide a vast host of financial services. And as a result of all this, again, we help maintain financial stability for the system as a whole. We supervise all of the following institutions: bank holding companies, financial holding companies, state chartered member banks, U.S. branches of foreign banks, and thrift holding companies. And when I say we go in and regulate, I don't know if I'm losing a few people. What we do is we go in to check and make sure that they have adequate capital. That is, that they have enough money. That their assets are of a high quality, i.e. they aren't in those nasty subprime mortgages that are now worth pennies on the dollar. That they have proper management, and that these banks are liquid, i.e. if there was a run on the bank, that they would be able to make their payments in a time. They would be able to cash out their depositors in a timely manner. Additionally, with Dodd-Frank, recent piece of legislation that I'm sure some of you may have heard about, the Fed has no authority. We are tasked with creating risk-based capital measures, conducting stress tests of the financial sector as a whole, and determining that large institutions have a living will. That is, if an AIG or Lehman Brothers were to go under, that there is a plan in place such that they can be unraveled and resolved without causing too much damage to the economy as a whole. Moreover, beyond regulating banks, we also regulate banks not just for safety and soundness, we do it on the consumer side as well. We go in and make sure that banks are not practicing unfair lending practices, that they aren't discriminating, that they aren't charging you a usurious rate on your credit card, or violating the terms of these agreements. And if you go on our website, frbsf.org/consumer, you can see a host of services we provide in this regard. And now to the fun stuff, financial services. We are the fiscal agent of the United States. That is, we are basically the ones who manage the Treasury's checking account. If you are, usually when I'm speaking to an audience a little older, I usually mention the fact that if you are getting a Social Security check, the Fed is indirectly responsible for making that payment happen. Question?
No.
Okay. Yeah. Additionally, if you want to invest in treasuries, you will actually be buying them through a online system that the Federal Reserve has in. And again, back to checks. We process a lot of them, almost $8 billion a year, with an average value of $1,400. Now, who here is good at math? What's the total amount there? Anyone? Okay. A little over $11 billion. And that's just a drop in the bucket. We also do wire services. So, for example, if you have a job where you do direct deposits into your bank account, the Fed is in all likelihood responsible for that. We do $21 billion a year in the Fed's automated clearinghouse. And from bank-to-bank transfers, also known as FedWire, we do a much, much larger volume, $680 billion. And just to put that in perspective, that's roughly 45 times GDP, annual gross domestic product of the United States as a whole. And cash. Now, here's the really fun stuff. I'm sure many of you have often wondered where the banks get cash from. You might think it comes from the Mint, the Treasury, but in fact, we are the agents responsible for distributing cash. We distribute it both to domestic banks and we distribute it to international institutions. And just again, to give you an idea of the scale of that, we have distributed a little over 30, we distribute on average a little over 30 million bundles a year. A bundle is 100 bills. So if, for example, I have a bundle of $100, I would have $10,000 in actual value. And just to hammer this home, this is less than a day's work. Out of curiosity, who's here with spatial racing? Anyone want to guess how much money this is? It's in 20s and hundreds.
Stack to the floor?
Stacks to the floor.
3 levels. Just go back.
Yes.
$1 billion.
Way less, way less. Pretty close, actually.
1 pound of gold.
Very good.
200 bundles?
It's a little over $80 million to death. Now, back to the other features of that. We are a rather unique institution in that we have a lot of sources of robustness in the monetary policy decision. We are both a national and a regional structure, and we are both a public and a private organization. Moreover, we are independent within the government. That is, our monetary policy decisions don't necessarily require congressional approval.
I'm just curious about one thing. Was that for one of the Federal Reserve banks in one day? Or is that all 12?
It's substantially less. Again, do on average 35 billion bills. We do three. Yeah, we do.
That's each bank.
No, this is for the whole 12 system as well. And so this is the Board of Governors office in Washington, D.C. The Board of Governors consists of 7 members. They are appointed by the President, approved by the Senate, and they serve 14-year terms. Then there are the 12 regional Federal Reserves. Their presidents are appointed by a regional board of directors, which consists of a consortium of bankers as well as other executives from various industries. And the Federal Open Market Committee itself consists of the 7 members of the Board of Governors and 5 presidents. These are our current governors. We currently have 2 vacancies. There were some attempts to fill them in the past year. Unfortunately, they weren't necessarily able to make it through the Senate approval process. This is our president, John C. Williams. He was appointed in March, and he is serving 5 years. He will be a voting member on the FOMC next year. And going back to our board of directors, again, I want to iterate that we really aren't an institution that is represented solely by bankers. We have representatives from commercial land development, Chevron, oil companies, as well as Blake Nordstrom. He, of course, as you may know, is the Nordstrom of Nordstrom's, the retail store. And I want to emphasize that our board of directors is actually a great source of value when we're making the monetary policy decision, because when sales slow down, there's a lag. It takes time for things to show up in the aggregate data that we look at, whereas these people see it happening as it happens. This is a map of the 12th district. As you can see, we clearly are an institution that was created in the early 1900s. 11 Federal Reserve districts are to the right of this line, all by its over here. And to give you an idea of the size of the 12th district, if it were its own country, it would be roughly the 5th or 6th largest economy in the world. Question: who owns the Fed? Anyone thought about Treasury?
Congress. Treasury?
Good guess.
Nobody.
What?
No one odds.
No one audits the Fed.
The GAO.
Oh, very good. Very good. Yes, we are actually audited by multiple institutions. We do a standard financial audit. We are audited on a regular basis by Deloitte and Touche, one of the big 5 accounting agencies, or is it big 4? We are also audited on a regular basis by the GAO, the Government Accountability Office, and we also report to Congress on a fairly frequent basis. Every 6 months we do a report to Congress called, oddly enough, the Monetary Policy Report to Congress. And if you're interested in reading any of these things, you can go to them at these websites. It's a little bit of a long URL, but if you just go to federalreserve.gov Monetary Policy Report, you can check out these reports. We've been doing them for a long time now. Next question. How much does the Fed cost taxpayers? We're a big institution. You just learned that we do a lot. Clearly we got costs on it.
$1 billion.
How much?
$1 billion.
Okay.
$0.
$0? Anything else?
Don't you typically return money to the Fed?
Very good. Very good. This past year, we returned a little over $78 billion to the U.S. Treasury, and that money went to help reduce the deficit. Again, if you want to see our exact financial statements and what we've turned into and what our operating costs were, we basically cost a little over $1.6 billion, and we returned $78 billion. So it's a pretty good rate of return we're making. So just to recap, The Fed is an independent institution. It doesn't have any reliance on Congress for appropriations. The money we make off of our balance sheet is used to fund us, and then we turn over the remainder to the U.S. government to help reduce the deficit and pay taxes indirectly. We don't need we don't need congressional approval to make monetary policy decisions. Our governors are appointed for a long, extended period of roughly 14 years, and as a result, they all can't be appointed by a single administration. And our presidents are appointed by an independent board of directors, so you have a lot of regional variation and both public and private interest in the state of monetary policy. The goals of monetary policy. As I said before, we have the dual mandate. One is maximizing output and employment. The other is maintaining price stability. The tools of monetary policy. As I'm sure this list will be pretty familiar to many of you, we have the open market operations, that is the Fed buying and selling securities to influence the federal funds rate, that is the rate at which banks lend money to one another. Then we have the discount window. The Fed is the lender of last resort, and as you will see shortly, and during this last financial crisis, we clearly were in some cases. And then we have reserve requirements. This is something that I'm sure has been briefly mentioned in your econ class and been swiftly ignored, which is pretty much how the Fed currently treats the reserve requirements issue. As you can see, these gray bars denote recessions, economic downturns, and the Fed tries to stimulate the economy by cutting interest rates during recessions. And as you may notice, this interest rate is at 0. And we're sort of running well on tools of conventional monetary policy now, so we have started turning to unconventional tools. This is the discount rate. Again, as you can see, during the crisis, we were lending out nearly $100 billion per month at height of the crisis. And then we're going to unconventional monetary policy. We provided short-term, and just to give you an idea of how extensive these unconventional tools were, if you go to the Fed's website, we list approximately 7 tools of monetary policy. During the height of the crisis, I think we listed somewhere in the vicinity of 20, 22 or so. So at least we're shortening our list of tools. Okay, and of those 22 or so, 22 programs, we can break them down into roughly 3 categories. One is providing short-term liquidity. The way I've often found helpful is just to describe this as an extended form of the discount window. The discount window typically loans money to banks overnight. Some of these, the term option facility and other institutions that are on a slightly longer horizon, 28 to 90 days. Then we have the purchase of long-term securities. You might be more familiar with this as LSAT, or quantitative easing, or possibly, most recently, Operation Twist. That is the purchase of longer-term maturity treasuries. And lastly, we have provided targeted credit to borrowers and investors. And just to give you an idea of the scale of unconventional monetary policy, this is the Fed's balance sheet, our assets and our liabilities. And as you can see, from around 2005 to early 2000, well, mid-2008, this is pretty stable. I mean, it's slowly going up. And then you have all of these other programs getting going. So we go from having a little under $1 billion in assets to a little over $2 billion. And then when it looked like the economy was going to stall again, a few months later, we have quantitative easing 2, or our second round of large-scale asset purchases, where we purchased an additional $600 billion in treasuries and other securities.
Excuse me.
Yes.
I'm curious,
Do you purchase other loans through securitization besides mortgage-backed securities? Or is that primarily because of the crisis? So, and how much bad debt are you taking on?
What?
And how much bad debt are you taking on?
How much bad debt? In terms of the assets we purchase, they have to be indirectly government-backed. So when I say mortgage-backed securities, they're coming from Fannie or Freddie or an institution with government-backed stuff.
Which are generally more likely to default.
I can't say. And in terms of our liabilities, I mean, it's not that bad of a situation. We think that we hold roughly $1 trillion in cash, and the interest rate on that is 0. So we've got a lot of wiggle room. Okay, into the FOMC. This 27 by 11 foot table is where, when you make your presentations, you can imagine yourself speaking. At these meetings, we take security very seriously. There are electronic devices placed against the windows to keep people from listening in from afar. Additionally, we confiscate everyone's BlackBerries and iPhones before going in. This is both due to security reasons and the fact that several FOMC presidents have been known to have an addictions of Brick Breaker and Angry Birds. Again, the voting members of the FOMC consist of the 7 members of the Board of Governors and 5 Federal Reserve presidents. The New York Fed, which is responsible for actually physically conducting the open market operations, always has a voting member. And then 4 other presidents vote on a rotating basis. This is not to say that all members don't participate in the FOMC discussion and the monetary policy decision. In terms of their backgrounds, they're actually a pretty diverse group of fellows and ladies. We have many, as you might suspect, are economists. Others are individuals who've been in the Federal Reserve System a long time. Others come from banking regulation and other institutions within the federal government. And before the actual FOMC meeting, there is an intensive briefing process. I can attest because I've personally been a part of it. It takes a group of roughly 15 to 20 people who are working for 2 to 3 solid weeks to prepare a briefing for our president on what the current state of the economy is. And we do that roughly 8 times a year. And as a result of having this intense briefing process before, we get a lot of robust views. Not everyone's getting the information from the same source, and we view that as a strength of the monetary policy decision process. We're getting a lot of information from a lot of different sources, and so when we gather around that table, you will be getting a lot of different opinions. Okay, now let's get into the mechanics of the meeting itself. This is, again, inside the Board of Governors office. As you can see, we've got our lovely little logo right here. It's a formal but collegial environment. People fairly often refer to one another by their first name. Additionally, one of the unspoken laws of the FOMC is that as part of the inauguration process, you have to sing a song. I don't necessarily know what John Williams sung. I think he managed to weasel his way out of that one. But I think we can forgo this process when you sit around the FOMC table. I think everyone can figure it out. Right? Yes? And again, I want to emphasize that when the FOMC makes a policy decision, they're doing it for the nation as a whole. Especially right now, the 12th district is suffering a little bit more relative to other parts of the nation. But when our president goes to make a vote, he takes a course of action which is best for the nation as a whole. And in terms of what's discussed at these meetings, typically we talk about the most recent economic releases and what that portends for the rest of the economy. We also talk about what we think the economy is going to do given a certain course of action. And additionally, we talked about the challenge we're facing in that we have dual mandate, that we're trying to balance the goals of stable prices and full employment. Additionally, we are challenged with the fact that we have both a short-term horizon and a long-term horizon, that we could potentially do something to ease current conditions, but might be sacrificing long-term credibility, perhaps. In terms of the mechanics of the meeting itself, it starts off with a staff report. My colleague, Dr. Takhtamanova, wow, I finally succeeded in pronouncing it correctly.
So now you have to go to Yelena to Dr. Takhtamanova's office.
And you will have a report by the staff economist who describes current conditions. And then each of the FOMC members will go over and discuss their views on the current economic outlook. Then there will be a second round in which we discuss the proper role of monetary policy. And then finally, the chairman will issue an FOMC statement. And you, the voting members of the FOMC, will be responsible for voting it up or down. The FOMC statement itself is a statement saying what the federal funds rate will be. That is the primary policy tool. It will state what the status of unconventional tools are. Are we purchasing additional assets? Are we holding steady? Are we twisting again like we did last summer? And the FOMC statement itself has become another instrument of monetary policy. And on the September 22nd FOMC meeting, we recently made a rather stunning announcement in that we have said that based on current economic conditions, we expect to keep the federal funds rate low and at a 0 to a 0.25% interval until 2013. And as Yelena will show, Dr. Takhtamanova will show, that we'll show some evidence of that. Moreover, in the FOMC statement, we articulate our concerns to the economy as a whole, and that helps provide market participants with additional information on what we believe, on what they believe our future courses of action may be. And that is something we're really trying to get better at. Before 1994, we were sort of an Illuminati organization by some people's description, and perhaps by some people's descriptions we still are today. But before 1994, we didn't actually announce our federal funds target rate. It was left to a bunch of financial experts to look at what happens in the Treasury security market and then try and figure out what we're doing. Then in 2002, we started releasing the votes of individual FOMC members. And more recently, in 2007, we started including our own economic forecast in the FOMC statement, at least on a quarterly basis. And now we have press conferences after the meeting that Bernanke speaks on a quarterly basis and does a Q&A with the press regarding monetary policy and the FOMC decision. Okay, these are pictures from
control of the monetary policy. We lost almost 98% of what the dollar was worth, correct? 90%, we say. Is that a true statement? And we've also accumulated how many trillions of dollars of debt? How can you stand here and act like you've done a good job, or this entity has done a good job at all, and laugh and joke about it while we're here being serious, wanting to know what the Fed is really doing? I don't understand why there's not more questions. And also how it's not even constitutional that you don't ask Congress for the right to spend money, and you talk about like that's a good thing. How is that a good thing?
I'm sorry, what's your question?
I just would like to know simply what is money and why do you print it? What is the Fed's purpose to print money?
Well, first off, we don't print money. The Bureau of Printing and Engraving.
Well, what gives you the go ahead to tell them to print money? What is that backed upon these days? And what is money? Because I know what it is, but do you?
What's your concern about inflation?
What was that?
What seems to be the concern?
What is the concern is there's trillions of dollars in debt, our economy is in shambles, and this guy's over here laughing about it and telling about how it's all pretty and nice. This is not pretty and nice.
We are here to inform, not to enforce any decisions, so it's not laughing at you or at you. Just
I just want to know
sharing information.
enough of that. What is money, and what gives the Fed the power, or what is their reasoning behind telling the German company to go ahead and print it? Is there any answer for that? What is money? Just simply, what is it?
Money is a medium of exchange.
What is it?
Money is a medium of exchange.
And that's all you have? Money is debt. And if you don't know that, then we all need to maybe do a little bit of research before we came into this room. Money is debt. Debt that we owe. Debt that is upon the backs
We'll have
of the
lots of more
corporations in
questions
this country.
towards the end, and I think that'll be a much better venue for sort of these longer and more in-depth questions.
No, it's a
So
simple question.
I
What
think
is
we'll
money?
do the question and answer. We'll do these at the end during the question and answer section.
Says
So thank you very much for
questions
your
on the board.
question. Well, I think we should probably move on and cover that in more
Okay,
detail
I would
later on.
appreciate it.
Well, just the short response. It's
Maybe
a
we should
unit
ask
of
me some
account,
questions.
medium of
That can explain
exchange,
better what
and
it
stored
is.
value.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Good.
Yes.
I had a really quick question. The Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco specifically, is that formed as a private corporation itself?
Yes, it is actually. Yes, our state chartered banks, banks under our charter own a small share of that, and we pay dividend on those shares, and the rest, again, we turn the rest of our income over to the Treasury.
So, I'm thinking that most people would say the current bubble was basically an extension of the dot-com bubble relative to monies that were made and lack of investment or faith perhaps in the stock market at the start of it. Obviously, feed the housing bubble and of course low interest rates. I think Greenspan was right in that he was doing his job. He kept interest rates low because he could, which is by definition obviously the Federal Reserve's job. But then of course it led to this other bubble. Not that it was everything, but a good portion of the larger bubble in the housing market. So now y'all, definitely you're doing a quantitative easing. You've got these newer tools you're coming out with. In that, and some people, I remember the debate that maybe the Federal Reserve should have more tools, policies, relative to bubbles. But I think everyone that knows it would agree that you can't give them that much power, and what is a bubble, and what can you do about it? But beyond that, so beyond saying, well, we see some irrational exuberance, in the Greenspan days, and I'm seeing the new president seem more politically inclined. What tools do you see in the future? Have you learned something as the Federal Reserve from the dot-com into the housing? Have you learned something from there that you project forwards? I guess my question.
I think I'm going to steal a few lines from our director of research, Glenn Rudabosha, with his letter with some of his thoughts on bubbles. Monetary policy is an unfortunately blunt instrument, and when it comes to bubbles, there are two schools of thought. There's the idea that we should prick them or try and lean against them to decrease their size, and then there's the school of thought that when they pop, we just try and use monetary policy to clean up the mess. And there's still a vast amount of debate on what the best approach is and when it necessarily is the best approach. No, it's not a satisfactory answer.
Yeah.
Yes.
As I understand it right now, the whole idea is to have money available so that it's not the supply of money that stops economic growth. But it's kind of like pushing on a string. It's sitting in there, and you could have a whole discussion on what it's being used for, the stock market or vice versa. But once that money starts being put into circulation and the economy starts to take off, what can the Fed do to keep from repeating inflation like we had in the 70s and early 80s? And the corresponding interest rates that go with it.
Well, actually, that's a very good question. Going back to our balance sheet, these guys are excess reserves that we have from banks that stuff, all that extra money that is slushing around. What we can do is we can change the interest rate on that, so we can extract that. If we need to, we can extract that excess liquidity from the system.
By raising interest rates. Right. Is that how you get it back down? Or is that a result?
There is still one of the things that we can do is there is some change in the policy that we can now charge interest on reserves. So one of the things they can do is increase the interest rate of reserves and thereby discourage or slow down, say, pumping of money back into the economy should there be inflationary pressures. There are a few other tools that they have actually been testing to make sure that they can be operational, such as, for example, creating another longer-term account, and so that they could lock up, if you will, some of those reserves in the longer-term account, and again, thereby slowing down the speed of those reserves in the economy and prevent inflation from building. I think the big question is, in terms of the tools, do they have the technical tools to create that they do? The trick is to know when the time is right. We don't want to do it too soon because, as we'll talk in a second, there's a lot of weakness in the economy. We don't want to exacerbate it any further. At the same time, if you wait too long, it could be and that's the trick. So we just have to see it. We'll be able to come on the result.
I think I'm